Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Randhawa.
Kids and young adults in our program can actually go on to consume these foods without restriction. So they're actually going on to a life of non-allergy, and that's just something that's not seen in OIT.
She's sobbing. Yeah. There are tears coming down.
I'm crying because now we both cried.
I know, what the heck? Come on, Dr. Randhawa. What are you doing?
We're professionals, we're not hysterical.
So in a matter of just a few months, you go from eating 0 cow's milk to drinking 3 or 4 ounces of cow's milk like that. And that type of response is not a desensitization response, right? That is a tolerance induction response.
Hi. Hello. And welcome to EpiPod.
Sarah is a mom to 2 little boys with food allergies.
And Danielle has navigated life-threatening allergies her entire life.
Living with an invisible health condition is so isolating.
The fear and the anxiety.
Trying to cover it up so you don't affect anybody else.
Especially your kids. Sound familiar?
Join us on the couch and take a load off with people who just get it.
We're so glad you're here. Welcome back to EpiPod. Danielle, I maybe am most excited for this episode.
No, I literally... I feel akin to what parents must feel like when they're at Disneyland waiting for their kid to meet like Elsa and Anna. Like, this is your hero.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't like to put any of those like pressures on a human being, right? He's a human being trying to do research. He's started this program. We're talking about Dr. Randhawa, the founder and creator of the Tolerance Induction Program. And obviously I'm so grateful and thankful to him, but I also believe that there's a lot of questions out there that not only do I have, but like people have. And I think him agreeing, first of all, to come on a podcast and just like answer whatever we throw at him is so telling about like the authenticity and the quality,
the transparency
of the program, which I think sometimes they're criticized for. And so I'm really excited to ask him these questions and see what kind of answers we get. And obviously tell him thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for creating this, dedicating his life to this so that my family can have an opportunity at food freedom. So,
and if you are a food allergy adult, just know that I have quite a few questions for him up my sleeve. So stay tuned. If you are a food allergy adult, their program does have an age cap, and a lot of OIT doctors also have an age cap. So I really want to get into the weeds with him about, is there hope for us? Yeah. And like, will we ever get to have what Graham just got, which is food freedom with, at least right now, with everything except for peanut.
Yeah.
So
it's incredible.
Before we have him on, let's give you a little bit of background of who Dr. Randhawa is. He's a leading specialist in internal medicine, pediatrics, immunology, allergy medicine, and pulmonology with over 2 decades of experience.
Dr. Randhawa is the current medical director of pediatric pulmonology, clinical immunology, and allergy at Miller Children's Hospital. He has served at Miller's in various leadership positions for over a decade and is also the current program director of the Pediatric Pulmonology Fellowship at UCI and Miller Children's Hospital.
He has led several initiatives at Miller's, resulting in regional and national acclaim. Dr. Randhawa focuses on the research and treatment of orphan diseases, areas of medicine which have stalled in development and progress.
He's the founder, CEO, and chief medical officer of the Translational Pulmonary and Immunology Research Center. That's the TPIRC or TPIRC. That's what a lot of us say in the program. It's a nonprofit corporation located in Long Beach, California, which utilizes applied math, data analytics, biomarker development, and artificial intelligence to treat patients suffering from these orphan diseases.
Dr. Randhawa is also the founder of TPIRC's Southern California Food Allergy Institute, a nonprofit organization which has successfully induced remission in over 10,000 patients who are suffering from life-threatening food anaphylaxis.
And yeah, Danielle, I mean, the list goes on of his achievements, so we'll definitely post them in the show notes, but that's just a short background of this man's kind of history and skill set that he's bringing to the table for this program and just the community as a whole. So,
okay, speaking of, he's in the waiting room, so let's let him on in.
Let's do this. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Randhawa. I am so happy to talk to you and that you're here. My life has changed because of the Tolerance Induction Program. So it's truly an honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you both. I think what you guys do is amazing, so I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks.
Let's start at like the base level of, tell us what the tolerance induction program is. And in that answer, if you can kind of weave in like how it is actually different than OIT, I think a lot of people really, that's like the chief question they have right out the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I've been in this space for almost 20 years now. So back then, OIT was really just kind of in its infancy. Different universities were trying it in different ways. But OIT, really in and of itself is just a form of desensitization, right? So desensitization, it's kind of a boring term, but it's an important term to understand. And all it means is that we are taking an immune system and getting it to be less reactive for a period of only a few days or even a few hours. It's a very limited amount of time. And desensitization, we do it for drugs, for antibiotics, we do it for certain things like that, but it doesn't last very long. And that's unfortunately the case with OIT, right? Even in best cases of OIT, you get a very brief kind of stay of the relief of the condition, meaning food allergies may abate for a 1 day, maybe 2 days, but you got to take that small amount of whatever that food is all the time. TIP is totally different, right? So tolerance induction program, or what TIP is really based on my experience as a transplant immunologist. So I'm an ICU transplant pulmonary immunologist who happens to be an allergist. Oh. And so I kind of came into this space with a totally different mindset. And what TIP does is literally take about 400 plus data points from every single patient who comes in. We draw their blood, we run all this data. We use that data to cross-match their immune system to very specific biosimilar proteins. What that means is if you're anaphylactic to dairy or for peanuts, we're going to find all biosimilar proteins that your specific immune system will accept as okay and normal and cross-match that up, get those proteins in your system to actually turn down your immune response to dairy or peanuts. So in a matter of just a few months, you go from eating 0 cow's milk to drinking 3 or 4 ounces of cow's milk like that. And that type of response is not a desensitization response, right? That is a tolerance induction response. And the long-term benefits of that is that kids and young adults in our program can actually go on to consume these foods without restriction. So they're actually going on to a life of non-allergy. And that's just something that's not seen in OIT.
Yeah. I immediately got chills when you said that because we just got there. I mean, your program just helped us get there. When I was told by the provider, who shout out to Savannah, she is amazing. When she told me like, your son is cleared for dairy and uncapped, meaning like he has to have his maintenance amount, of course, for some time. But after that, he basically has no restrictions. The weight of the world lifted from my shoulders, truly. I mean, we have lived a life of, I'm going to cry, but like we have lived a life of fear his entire life. And it's just not fair that parents have to go through that. And it's not fair to the kids either, but really when they're young, I mean, parents bear that burden. And to be given that amount of relief, and don't get me wrong, we've busted our butts in your program. Your program is not easy, my friend. But so we got there too, right? But I am so grateful for your research and the ability to try something new. And I will say, Dr. Randhawa, I come from a journalism background. I was an investigative reporter for many years before having kids and kind of switching the game a little bit. And, with it being so new, a lot of people have questions, like are a little skeptical of like, wait a second.
Or a lot skeptical.
Yeah, or a lot skeptical of like, hey, like we don't really know about this, or like we don't have, the FDA hasn't approved it yet, like all of these things. And so I put on my like research hat, and dug in and did the best I could, of course, to find the information I needed, and ultimately decided like this is worth a try. Like the any kind of downsides or skeptics like didn't move the needle enough for me to not give it a shot. And I'm so grateful every day that I did. So going straight to that, because I think that's another like burning question is like, when is FDA approval coming? Are you working towards that? I know the research study was just shared, right? Or the, what do you call it? Published? Peer-reviewed on the dairy front. So that was super exciting. And I think that was a big thing people said all the time too. Like, well, there's no peer-reviewed research. Well, now there is. So I know you guys have been working on that. Tell us where things stand in that camp, like when it comes to FDA approval and just the idea that this program could expand in a really great way to be more accessible to other people.
No, those are all very fair questions. I always get a kick out of the idea that we are new. I mean, again, we've been doing this for about 20 years. Established in Southern California, really for about 5-6 years, and then all of a sudden, folks were coming from other states, and then eventually other countries. And to be honest, I was not my intent. I had no idea that the approach was going to be applied to people from such a distance, but. Really, at our core, to answer your question, is that we are a leading system, right? Like we are really changing not just the field of food allergy, but the entire field of medicine and life science has not seen what we do, right? Because if you think about what happened to your son as an example, we were able to predict in a very clear sequence how to essentially get rid of all his allergies. It's really that simple, right? He's at a point now where he's going to clear or he's already cleared dairy, so he can have ice cream and pizza and all these wonderful things, right? That is an unheard of thing, right? Like nobody sets that goal as the target, but we can not only set the goal, we actually forecast it. We tell you how many visits it will take to get there. How do we do that? That requires massive amounts of data science, different types of research, all these things that have to fit together. If I said to you, you have something simple like high blood pressure, and you went to your doctor and asked the doctor to forecast and say, hey, in how many months will I have my high blood pressure under control? The answer is they couldn't tell you. They would have to say, I'm not sure, let's try this pill, come back in 3 months, we'll see if it's working, we'll adjust again. So we are very different than the rest of healthcare. And what that does is it puts a different kind of onus or pressure on us where, to try to publish this work is not easy, but we've actually done it many times over many, many years. This dairy peer review paper is just one of really about a dozen to almost now 18 papers that have been published.
Oh, wow.
Somehow, the world of allergists out there would still say, oh, no, that's not enough. The threshold is not enough. Then you talked about the FDA, right? So the FDA actually does not regulate or approve many different treatments, including OIT, including allergy shots. Very common things that have been around for a very long time are simply not regulated. So, we have actually gone through the FDA application process. We've spent a huge amount of money trying to get this process moving, and we are still moving forward with them. They are very slow. It's a legislative, part of the government. And, what is their main hesitation for us? It's actually nothing clinical. They love what we do. They simply have questions around the tests that we run, which frankly, other people run some of the same tests. And they're like, well, we don't control those tests. We don't regulate them. So how can we regulate your AI software product? So on we go. But ultimately, what the best result is what's happened to your son, right? I mean, that's what we look for. 16,000 patients have been in our system. We are the largest single system of this type in the world. And we grow every day. In fact, we will close 2024 with, roughly speaking, 3 patients hitting remission every single day.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yet I think also there's so many people out there who are like, but I want to do this. Like I want the opportunity to do this. And which leads me to my next question of, there's all this talk of like new clinics and whether or not, your idea is able to be shared amongst other allergists is a different question. But in terms of just within the Food Allergy Institute, where's the next spot? I know North California was on the list, but then like all my East Coast peeps are like, hey, what's happening over there? Is there any way you can come this direction? Anything you can divulge on that front?
It's the most common question I get asked. It is, let me give you some perspective on this. We have to do this safely and effectively. The technology is key, right? So we've built that. It's running great and it continues to get better every day. That's what good AI does. We, as you know, have our wonderful food protein products, gummies, tarts as well, that are just started and things of that nature. So really our product and our ability to treat patients is not an issue, right? We can treat 50,000, we can treat 100,000 patients. We are absolutely ready to do that. The question is, if we take our system and our product out to the East Coast or out to Texas, do we have the personnel trained where the experience of what you've been through would actually be replicated? That's the big question. And since everything we do is so new, it does take time to kind of develop those relationships and hire the folks and make sure that you have, great providers like Savannah, who will say, hey, this is going to be the same experience for everybody. So how are we looking at to do that? One option that we're looking at right now is working with a select number of allergists, actually. So there are allergists who've come and visited our large number of facilities. A lot of folks, I know you've seen our facilities, but a lot of folks don't realize when they come to the Food Allergy Institute, you're coming to a very large organization, 125,000 square feet of space, hundreds and hundreds of employees that make this thing operate for all of these kids and young adults who come in the program. So these allergists actually came down on their own and visited and toured and were quite impressed with what we're doing, and then asked, how can we participate in this process? And we sat down and said, well, maybe one option is to allow them to actually conduct the food challenges, because that is really the only reason you come out to Southern California, is to clear these foods. And since right now, roughly, we go almost 900 plus food challenges, literally 900, before we have any one with a single symptom, and most of the time it's a very mild symptom. That's a pretty good number. That's a pretty good number they're comfortable with conducting those challenges. So the short answer to your question is, we are looking at taking that model out, initially up to the Bay Area, potentially to the East Coast, and then honestly, if that works well, then we could expand that relatively quickly, as long as we could do it safely.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding you correctly, because this sounds really exciting and something that could, make it more accessible to so many people. So you're saying, like, initially maybe somebody might have to fly out to the California clinic and do some initial testings and whatnot, but the every 10-week cycle, when we go back and we do the challenge in the office and we exercise and all of those things, that could potentially in the future, if this model pans out or works out with trained allergists that are on board with the program or providers, they could essentially do those visits so that it would make it to where people aren't flying out to California every 12 weeks from the East Coast.
You nailed it. And I think that'd be huge, right? I mean, that takes the travel burden away. And we are also looking, one of the things that, we've done to seriously expand is we've actually expanded the most critical element of our organization, which is our laboratory, right? So without blood work, that's our data. Without the data, we can't treat patients. So we just scaled our laboratory to a factor of 5, like literally meaning like we can absorb 5 times the volume by building out this massive new laboratory. It's beautiful. It works great. And we added a kitting process, meaning like we've actually tested this all throughout the East Coast now, where folks can get their blood drawn somewhere, remotely on the East Coast, ship it over, and we can guarantee that the results are going to be absolutely on spot, so that portion of distribution of this is actually solved as well. So hence, if we can actually solve the allergist location issue and find the right type of affiliate, I think the rest of the process will work quite well.
Wow. That's crazy. I want to speak up for the allergy adults.
Okay.
Because I shared with you before we started recording, I have been life-threatening, anaphylactic, 911, however you want to state it. I am extremely allergic to peanuts and tree nuts, and I have been for my whole life. And I actually used to be allergic to dairy. They called it lactose intolerant, but when I tell the symptoms to Sarah, she's like,
I think they didn't tell you the right thing.
Yeah. She's like, it's giving 90s baby.
Yeah.
But as an allergy adult, and I know there are a lot of listeners out there who became allergy patients as adults. They ate peanut butter their whole life. They had soy their whole life. And now they're learning to navigate what it's like to live with an invisible health condition. And so speaking for both the people like me who have had this their whole lives and people whose lives, marriages, families have been turned upside down because adult onset anaphylactic food allergy, they're like, whoa, like I don't know how to be a wife to this person anymore. We used to be travel foodie couple, and now I'm afraid to leave my house. And so we get DMs, we get emails. I myself live this way. And an adult in the allergy space, it's so exciting to hear all of things like TIP or how OIT is changing, to see when I was in OIT not too long ago, seeing all of the kids in the waiting room and how their bodies can tolerate it. And it's so exciting. I'm so happy for them. However, I feel so left out. I was literally never even educated that I needed to carry an EpiPen until I went to the hospital for it. Like I didn't know anything. And so it just feels it feels hopeful to hear this, and also hopeless, because your program has an age cap. Most OIT doctors also have an age cap. Mine was like, okay, listen, the success rate is a lot lower for adults for a lot of different reasons, but I'm willing to try with you because you're so motivated. And it was just too much mental health wise. But can you talk a little bit about why your program has an age cap and what that means just from the medical perspective and the immune system? And also, is there hope for allergy patients, and especially for these people who, I mean, this is my normal, I don't know any different, but these people whose literally their marriages, they feel like their marriages are in jeopardy. Their families, the way their kids are growing up is different because of how they see their parents dealing with this. So can you speak to those things for the allergy adults?
Sure. I mean, look, I know it's difficult. You're one of the 25 million adults in this country who developed food anaphylaxis after the age of 18. Really, if you look at the total population, 2/3 of them develop anaphylaxis after the age of 18 into adulthood, sometimes in their 30s, sometimes in their 40s, sometimes in their 60s, to foods that they've eaten on a regular basis previously. And that's just a story, right? That tells you that this condition is not something that you can outgrow. It's something that you have to really convince your immune system to stay not even tolerant to, but in a state of remission to. And so, you brought up a lot of great points. I feel that the adult population is something that we have never neglected. So remember, we're a data science company, so we will always do things built on data science. Roughly, 6-7 years ago, we started taking patients up to age 21. Then we recently, about 3 years ago, expanded to age 25. And now we are looking at age 30, right? So why are we kind of doing it in kind of small cohorts like that? Because it's the right way to collect data. But very soon, I'm sure in the next year and a half or so, we'll be able to expand this out to age 40 and age 50. There's no reason this can't work for adults, because fundamentally the immune system of an adult can undergo similar types of tolerance induction mechanisms. We've already proven it. Look, we have patients now, I've been doing this for a long enough time, where my oldest patients, when I first started the work, are now in their 30s. They are now parents. It's a whole different life that they live. And they are in such deep remission that their numbers never populate back. Their numbers are hard zeros. So that's what we're looking towards next. So I trust me, I hear you, and I think the adult population, to be honest with you, the ones in their 20s, they tend to be really, really great patients. They are on it. They don't make mistakes. They do everything on time. I've been quite impressed. So I feel like it's something we'd like to move on as fast as we can.
She's sobbing.
Yeah.
There are tears coming down.
I'm crying because now we both cried.
I know, what the heck? Come on, Dr. Randhawa. What are you doing?
We're professionals. We're not hysterical. It's really rare for an adult with allergies to be given hope. And so just hearing, I'm just crying on behalf of, I'm thinking about the loads of DMs and emails that I read weekly to my social media pages, to the podcast. These people feel hopeless. And I being one of them, as somebody who OIT just wasn't for me. So just hearing that there is possible help on the way, or that there are providers out there who are okay, in the future, hearing the words a year and a half is wild for somebody at the age of 40. That's crazy. So, I'm crying for myself, but also just thinking of all of the people who write in and they're like, this is fascinating. There's no hope for me.
Yeah.
And you're saying
that there is.
Hold on a second. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Look, I remain 1,000% dedicated to this space. I've committed my life to this work, and it would be negligent of us to not continue what we're doing. We know, we get patients to remission. Our next phase is looking at a curative model, which is really also very likely, frankly, based on what we're doing. And so, it's our obligation to do it, and we will get it done.
That's incredible. I have a question. You said the adult immune system can do what kids' immune systems can. The allergy space is so gray, and we talk about that all the time. And there's different, every allergist says something different.
Yes.
So something that I've heard before, not even from my current allergist, just past allergists and social media in general, is adults cannot handle it the same way. Like, it's sort of, your immune system is cemented. Is that true from your perspective?
We want to take a minute to tell you about one of our favorite food allergy friendly snack brands, Pulse Power, a high protein, all natural chickpea based snack line that is co-founded by an allergy mom. They have delicious snack sticks and chickpea spreads that are made in a dedicated top 14 allergen free facility. It's a great choice for school lunches and snack boxes. And in my house, we love all of the above. Check them out.
Now, I would totally disagree. The very first view I got into the food allergy space when I was at UCLA is I got to look at veterans, like U.S. veterans who were like in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, who had a diagnosis of food anaphylaxis. And because we had this great, electronic medical record system back then, I could actually track them all the way back to their 30s and 40s and see what happened to their allergic response. And it is really obvious that it shifts and changes, not as much as, say, like a 4 or 5-year-old, but it changes and it is absolutely mobile. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is good. So we know that we can change this system. It's not stuck. Now, one thing that can happen to adults that you don't really see in kids is that adults will very much control their microenvironment from a dietary standpoint. So I've seen plenty of adult patients with food anaphylaxis who will literally only eat like 10 things, and that's it. And because that's the safe life you live, right? Just 10 things. You take the same person who's allergic to peanuts and tree nuts, and let's say they're 5 years old. They will not express themselves and say, my stomach hurts a little bit, or maybe I'm getting a little bit of tingling in my nose. So they're going to continue to eat certain foods. Maybe it's legumes, or maybe it's going to be a certain amount of beef. But these proteins are actually going to change the way your immune system sees allergies, that you are aware of. So what adults do is they kind of put up these guardrails. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it turns the immune system down, meaning like a lot of your markers will actually start to lower themselves down. So sometimes allergists will say, hey, your numbers don't look that bad. Why don't we try a food challenge? Or why don't we try OIT? And then they're like, the numbers don't look bad, but guess what? Those numbers are falsely low. And so what we have to do in our data science model is predict whose systems are low and how are we going to reassess them. So as you know, we check data on kind of a once a year basis on all of our patients. It's a very important thing. That's how we make sure that everything is safe and secure. The adult population needs the same type of model.
Okay, that's totally me. I'd rather have an adventure and have a good day and not ruin somebody's wedding day or whatever it is. I eat the same things over and over again, and I have my whole life. Like, I was a picky eater when I was a kid, and now I'm like, this is the course of least resistance. Do I want to go to the Cabana Club? Yes, I do. Therefore, I will eat the little thing that I eat every day.
Yeah.
So that makes total sense. I'd never heard anything like that before. And I did fail a food challenge that my numbers were very low for pistachio, a lot lower than sesame or, things that I eat all the time and pass those food challenges. And I could never understand. I was like, well, that's so weird. But that gives a lot of clarity and tracks.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into my next question, and kind of going back a little bit to what we were talking about before with the blood work, being able to possibly do that one day, not necessarily there in California. It makes me think of the cost that the money that I spend to do the blood work every year, which again, you've got a fan right here, right? Like I just am trying to also play the devil's advocate side of like, people are saying, well, I want to do this, but we don't have the money. Like we can't be spending that much money to not only fly out there, but the cost of the testing and things like that. What can you tell us about that? Is there any kind of hope for either insurances covering better, or again, like this whole model of possibly being able to do it somewhere else? Would that reduce the price? What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. Look, when I first got into this space, remember, I built this as a nonprofit initially, and that's pretty unusual. But I did it because I was 100% invested in this idea of how can we use data science to actually solve medical health problems, not just, dabble here or there, but actually solve a problem. Once the tolerance reduction program tip was moving, my goal was to have it cost roughly the same amount as orthodontics. That was kind of what was in my head. I was like, all right, 2-3 years max, you're going to pay for, having a great smile for the rest of your life. This is not easy to do. And, we hire a lot of people and a lot of, activities happening to support every patient who comes to the program. I felt that was a reasonable price tag for just a few years. And then obviously afterwards that would drop down. The major kind of, I'd say, hurdles that came after that was, first, we were not in network with a lot of insurance companies, right? So a lot of the typical costs for those things were not getting covered, so we had to figure that out. Took us a few years, but we've generally solved that problem. Now, any kind of clinical care you're getting it covered. We're doing, everything we can on our end, including building large departments within our organization to support patients to get that covered. The second point which you're bringing up is the laboratory side, and if I may, I want to expound on that briefly. The reason why we have to have our own laboratory, and again, what is our laboratory? It is the only level 3 high complexity laboratory regulated in the United States that does food allergy based testing. It's also the largest food allergy testing facility in the world right now. For the volume and what we do, it is the biggest and the best of what we do. It also allows us to develop and make sure that the tests we run, including new tests, are run at the same high level of accuracy all the time. So Quest and LabCorp simply cannot do it, and they will actively state that. They'll say, yes, we cannot run these tests. Sorry. But the bigger problem is not that they can only not run the tests, but when they do run some of the tests that overlap with us, their accuracy goes out the window. So you can run a peanut test, and their accuracy will be within 25-30%, and ours is less than 1%. And when we base everything on data science, we can't afford to have 30% error rates. We need it very, very tight. So when we decided to make our own lab, that was not easy to do. Built the whole thing up, got it up and running. I really thought that the insurance world would look at us and say, oh, this is good. And in fact, you guys are charging far, far less than what Quest or LabCorp would do for any battery test that's even similar. But unfortunately, it comes in the politics of contracting. And literally, in the entire United States, Quest and LabCorp are a monopoly. They own every contract out there. We have tried. I cannot tell you how much time and money I've spent on this to try to crack into these different networks. What can happen? And after 7.5, 8 years now, finally, we got a Blue Cross contract. Now, wow. Not the best contract. It'll save patients roughly about $1,000. Hey, better than nothing.
We'll take it. Yes, I just saw a patient said that it all of a sudden it says it's covered within network, and they were like, I'm going to call and see what that means. So this is tell us just a little discount basically on that kind of chunk of money that lab work typically is.
Exactly. Usually it's about $2,000 to $2,500. This will knock off $1,000 to $1,200 again for Blue Cross, which is a win. But we also, after much arm wrestling, also just got a United Healthcare contract, which we are now in negotiations with. But again, what patients and the community can do for us is to talk about this and actually bring it up to, like, if you work for a large employer, going to your benefits manager and saying, look, this is not fair. We are not making anything on these laboratory tests. We're literally running at a loss. Even when patients pay fully out of pocket, we don't break even on the lab tests. So we just need it to operate and function in a fair and equitable way. But we're going to keep working on it. I think if we get 2 or 3 more contracts, then this is a big game changer for us.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
One of my very best friends from college, I actually got into the sorority that I did because they thought that we were sisters. We look freakily alike. And she and her toddler is in your program. And one of my other very good friends from college, she and her toddler are in your program. And they talked to me a lot about the testing and the cost. And they're like, we are so committed. It's very similar to what you were saying.
Yeah.
We are so committed. But if we did not have 2 working parents with master's degrees with very high paying engineering jobs, I don't know how we could. And I've always been like, what the heck? Like the blood test and the testing piece of it really just never made sense to me. And that sheds so much light. You're not even running at cost. Like, you're losing money on these tests. And so I think I can't wait to send this episode to those girls.
You're like, here's why. This is exactly it.
And not having air, as somebody who has had a lot of mild reactions with OIT, and had blood tests that don't make sense to me, not having that room for error, it just makes so much sense. So thank you so much for going into so much detail with that.
There's so much information. There's so many more questions I have. We're going to break this into 2 parts because it really just, we need more time with Dr. Randhawa.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot we haven't covered yet. So let's end here for now. And we will see you next week with more questions and answers.
Next week, we're going to hear about the future of food allergy treatment and just keep diving into the nuance, diving into the gray. So we'll see you next week. And so sorry to keep you on a cliffhanger.
Yes, but it'll be worth it. We promise.
Yes. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.